Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Council Executive Meeting. There are no apologies to give as everybody is here, so welcome to you all and those watching along at home. Our first agenda item is declarations of interest. So I'll just give a couple of seconds in case any colleagues wanted to declare any additional declarations, but I can't see any. Thank you very much. Then we can go straight through to agenda item 2, public participation. And we've got one member of the public registered to speak today to the executive who will be joining us remotely. And that's Flick Williams, who's registered to speak on agenda item 4, the housing delivery programme update on lifetime home standards and accessible housing. So hopefully you can hear me and you've got 3 minutes to speak to us.
The housing delivery programme. I see mention of affordable homes, of passive house technology and sustainability, even a nod to extra care facilities, but absent is any apparent commitment to lifetime home standards or wheelchair accessible housing. I see in the annex to the report the phrase equalities impact assessment completed with a question mark after it, and in the main report the repetition of the printing of the public sector equality duty. Printing of the wording of it isn't meeting it. Together, that just about sums it up. Housing for disabled people is barely even an afterthought, and none of this is truly sustainable because without taking into account the housing need of a significant and rising percentage of the population, you fail us and you do in fact fail the public sector equality duty. You have included extra care facilities, and yes, the incidence of impairment rises with age, but this is a giveaway as to how disabled people are viewed by this authority as passive recipients of social care rather than independent, economically active people who wish to live in regular housing developments, either with families, with partners or alone. It is not uncommon for wheelchair users to be housed in unsuitable properties that do not meet their needs. Those with means who are owner-occupiers commit vast sums to structural adaptations or chase the relatively small number of bungalows when they go on the market. Because land is expensive in this city, single-floor dwellings are at a premium and too many apartment buildings are built without lifts. Allow me to quote from the National Planning Policy Framework. Inclusive design acknowledges diversity and difference and is more likely to be achieved when it is considered at every stage of the development process from inception to completion. However, it is often mistakenly seen as a building regulations issue to be addressed once planning permission has been granted. As I told Climate Emergency Scrutiny last April, your desire to build all new developments as low or no car directly discriminates against those disabled people who rely on their own vehicle. Many are unable to use public transport and require access to their often adapted vehicles 24/7. So if you have a wheelchair accessible vehicle with hand controls from Motability, no car club is ever going to work for you, and you need to have a dedicated parking space adjacent to your property. And this is about wider inclusion. Harbinteg report that data from the English Housing Survey shows that 91% of homes don't provide the 4 features that even make them visitable. They calculate that 400,000 wheelchair users are living in properties that are neither accessible nor adaptable. This authority needs a commitment to the percentage M42 and M43 housing standards in all new housing developments. It is part of genuine sustainability as well as a commitment to social values. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution that we'll take into account when we consider that agenda item later in the meeting. And that now takes us on to agenda item 3, which is the forward plan. This starts on pages 1 to 4. I'll just give a couple of seconds in case anybody wishes to raise anything. And then if I could please see if colleagues are happy to accept the forward plan. So that's a clear consensus in favour of accepting it. Thank you very much. We then will go straight on to agenda item 4, housing delivery programme update, which starts on page 5 of our agenda packs. And I will hand over to Tracy first, but welcome to Tracy and Sophie.
Thank you very much. So this report provides you with an update on this phase of the progress of the housing delivery programme, whose original ambition was to build 600 homes, of which 40% would be affordable. Current work in progress, both on committed and completed schemes, is going to provide a combined housing provision of 472 homes, of which 279 are affordable, meaning that 59% of the delivery is of affordable tenures, which far exceeds that original ambition of 40%. So with the recommendations in this report, that you would see that increase by a further 185 homes, of which 135 of those would be affordable. And a combination of that gives shows that we're on a path to exceed the target of 600 homes and delivering an average of approximately 60% affordable homes across the programme, with 237 of those to be built to Passive House standards. I'm going to ask Sophie to comment on the comments of the public speaker around accessibility when she gives us a bit more detail, because although that the accessibility issue isn't specifically covered in the report, we have done an awful lot of work to increase the level of accessible housing stock within the city, both through the housing delivery programme, but also through our own asset strategy to look at existing social housing and how we regularise the increase of accessibility through our investment programmes as a kind of business as usual strand. So there's some very specific recommendations within the report. The council was successful in bidding to the One Public Estate Brownfield programme for our work on Ordnance Lane, and we were successful in getting a 2.43 million grant to contribute towards the enabling works. But the terms of that grant require that we've spent that by March 2024. And we want to make a recommendation in this report to seek to spend that enabling works ahead of a decision to proceed with the overall scheme. I think everybody would acknowledge that we have unprecedented market conditions at the moment, from a range of things, whether that be to do with Brexit, to do with the impact of a global pandemic, or whether it's to do with the cost of living and the energy crisis. The housing market is not behaving in a normal way at the moment, and we feel that it's prudent and financially cautious to approach the next phase of the housing delivery programme in a slightly more cautious way. So this paper is seeking permission to progress with the enabling works and utilise the grant funding, carry out those enabling works, and then come back to executive when we've had a chance for the market to slightly stabilise, and we've got we'll have a fully costed package back to actually sign off the business case on Ordnance Lane. So it's continue to make progress, but allow the market to slightly stabilise before we do so. Another site within the housing delivery programme is Willow House. That's just inside Walmgate Bar. It's the site of a former old person's accommodation programme, and that's been vacant since 2017. Since it's become vacant, we've done quite a lot of work with residents in the local area to consult on future use of the site, and they're very keen to bring it into use as family housing, whilst preserving the green amenity area between the building and Walmgate Bar. So this report sets out a plan to progress the design of the Willow House site and include within it the underused garage forecourts that surround Willow House, to have a broader South Walmgate regeneration master plan, and for us to undertake the detailed design and the planning work to be able to bring a full business plan back to you next year. Plan also recommends proposals for developing the 2 vacant plots of land at Lowfield Green. I'm going to ask Sophie to take us through those proposals and to address the question of accessible housing. But one further thing to report since the report was written is that we've now received £1.998 million of devolution funding for second-hand shared ownership houses with retrofit, which will help us to reduce carbon outputs from those houses. We've made the first completion on the acquisition of one of those houses. Another one will follow on Monday, I hope, with a further 24 to follow. And that's just an update on that aspect about adding to our programme. So I'll hand over to Sophie, who'll take you through the Lowfield proposals.
Thank you, Tracy. So given the construction on Lowfield has been ongoing for over 3 years, the options for the site, the 2 sites, have been analysed against certainty of delivery, speed of delivery and overall social value that the development options can offer. For Lowfield Plot A, the previous Health and Public Services building plot on the entrance adjacent to Dijon Avenue, we considered options to develop the plot for specialist housing, dispose of the site, or bring the site into the housing delivery programme. Proposals for specialist housing, whilst meeting a known need in the city, are currently unviable and therefore would require considerable time to bring forward a deliverable proposal. Disposal of the site without restriction would potentially increase the capital receipt, but would mean the council had no control over what was built or the speed of delivery. And given the sensitive location of the site, it was felt that this option was not proceedable. Bringing the site into the housing delivery programme allows the council to utilise existing house types, reducing the cost and timescales of the project. We also know there is continued demand for new homes at Lowfield, particularly accessible homes such as bungalows, which we would seek to maximise on the site. The recommendation therefore proposes the housing delivery programme commence design work whilst engaging with the community to bring the site forward. The larger plot on Lowfield Green, plot B, was reviewed against the same criteria whilst also prioritising the delivery of housing for those aged over 55. Data from the local housing needs assessment supports that there is a current and increasing demand for high quality accessible older persons housing of all tenures to support residents to live independently at home for longer, and therefore the options analysis for this plot were tailored to respond to that demand. An unencumbered land sale would be very unlikely to deliver older persons mixed tenure housing, and there was therefore not deemed proceedable. Whilst there is significant support to deliver this through the housing delivery programme, there is currently an insufficient financial capacity to deliver such a large project, meaning it may take a prolonged period to bring the site forward. Therefore, the option to dispose through an evaluated tender process is recommended. Significant soft market testing has been undertaken, and there is strong interest from the registered provider sector along with the community housing group. Site disposal via a compliant evaluated process allows the council to have greater control around delivery, both in terms of timescales and site logistics, to reduce disruption to existing residents, but also maximise social value with a scored criteria around affordable housing, community uses, sustainable construction, and accessible and inclusive housing. Just to answer the comments of the member of the public about accessibility, the Housing Design Manual, which was launched in October 2019, states that all of the houses delivered, all the properties delivered by the Housing Delivery Programme will meet building regulations Part M for accessible and adaptable. And a large percentage, 10%, but often more, will meet Part M for 3, which is wheelchair user dwellings. So just to make the point that inclusive housing is part of everything that we do in the housing delivery programme, and we're incredibly committed to that as part of the programme. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'll open the paper of any questions and comments. Go to Councillor Craghill first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really want to welcome this progress report on the housing delivery programme and the recommendations in the paper for progressing the programme further. This hasn't been the easiest time for progressing the delivery of highly sustainable and highly affordable developments. We've been through two years of COVID, rapidly rising construction costs, and now the cost of living crisis. And yet York's housing delivery programme has won many national awards for setting the standards for the future of housing delivery, and has contributed a significant proportion of the affordable homes delivered in the city over the last few years. I want to commend the housing delivery team for meeting every problem as it comes along head on and using creativity and a positive problem-solving approach to find a way forwards. As we've heard, the housing that we're now building at Duncan Barracks and at Burnholme, and the housing we have planning permission for at Ordnance Lane, will provide 60% affordable, highly energy efficient housing on zero carbon sites with very low energy bills for occupiers. And it will also provide highly adaptable and accessible housing. As Sophie says, that is absolutely very much a part of the housing delivery programme. And I know some of the first houses that were occupied at Lowfield were these highly accessible bungalows. And I spoke to some of the people in those houses who were really very pleased with what they found provided there. So that's definitely a part of what we're doing. They also provide all-round support for low carbon living in every aspect, a focus on healthy, mutually supportive communities. So also tackling social isolation, providing good links with existing neighbourhoods and surrounding residents, and delivering on the social value aspects as well. And we are also supporting the development of green skills, green jobs, and the local supply chain that we need for energy saving retrofit works to progress in existing housing as well. The programme, as you've heard, incorporates a very popular recycled shared ownership scheme, supporting people to choose and buy into their own market sale properties at affordable rates. And we are also supporting self-build, community-led development and land disposal to housing associations, which, as Tracy said, amounts to putting us on track for well over the 600 new homes that are the target of the programme. I think in the current economic conditions, it does make sense to proceed with as much as we can to meet local housing need, but as the paper says, to also ensure we're taking on a manageable and deliverable pipeline of sites, delivering social value, working with partners, and seeking some capital receipt to support the significant challenges in the council's budget. And I think the recommendations in the paper do that, just that. The approved planning application for Ordnance Lane represents an exemplar development combining energy saving with social value, and is the result of extensive consultations with local residents. It has the support of Homes England, which will most likely lead to an increase in affordable levels to 60%. So I think the recommendation on that at the moment does make sense. I am also delighted with the recommendation to progress further with the Willow House proposals near Warmgate Bar. My impression is that whilst residents in the area have been very much enjoying the archaeology on prescription, which has been a meanwhile use for the site, and is continuing to be so, they do really want to see family housing and buildings in permanent use on that site, as well as the preservation of the green space near Warmgate Bar. So the current design proposals offer to do this, but they still need a further stage of public participation to get to the final designs. So I really welcome the recommendation to move on to that next stage. Finally, Lowfield Green, of course, has been the first site in the housing delivery programme, and delivering very high levels of sustainability, 40% affordable housing and high levels of social value, with over 100 new homes built and occupied and very high levels of resident satisfaction. It has underpinned the success of the programme so far. So it is very important the 2 remaining plots on the site are built out to similar high standards as early as possible to minimise disruption to Lowfield's new residents and to the existing residents around the site. I think officers have explained the challenges regarding the original aspirations for the sites and the choices that we've looked at. And I think the recommendations do offer the best option in each case. So with that, I'm very happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Douglas.
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Chair. Of course, it is always a very positive thing to see housing built in our city, a city that absolutely needs an injection of affordable properties that people who have grown up in York or have come here for one reason or another can afford to live in. But I would like to remind everybody, and perhaps some of you are unaware, that in the last 10 years, all of the affordable homes built in the city, and that's through registered providers, housing associations and the council, have not kept pace with the right to buy. So we are not in a position of having more properties now than we did 10 years ago for the people that most need them. Now, I'm not going to say anything that is new to you. You've heard me say it before, that me and my Labour colleagues believe and will deliver 100% affordable on council-owned land, and we've committed to that, and we will find the financial models for doing it, which have been under discussion already. So We are absolutely committed to that, and residents tell us regularly that they don't think that it's right that council-owned land is used to build homes that will go into the private sector, and essentially what the council is doing is subsidising private properties, some of which are up to £400,000 in value. The other aspect that I'd like to raise for you that I think is really important for our city at this point in time, and has been for a while now, is about accessibility to health services, and also step down and intermediate facilities to support the NHS. It's really concerning to me that we haven't been able to bring through any of the health provision that we hope to put on some of the sites, or at least start to think about it. And I do understand that there are external factors for that, but I really think we need a focus within our planning department, within a housing delivery discussion with partners as to how we are going to make that happen. Because let's face it, it's getting no easier, is it? GP appointments, 8-week wait for most people, and we are not bringing enough through within the planning process. The other thing that we need to really think about is how we're supporting our NHS in this larger context through the hospital. Step down intermediate facilities is something that we should be considering on council land too. This would help hospital discharges and easing of the pressure, the extreme pressure on York Hospital. But I will go back to the fact that we should be building 100% affordable on council-owned land, and I can't wait to get on with that job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tracy?
Yeah, I mean, the financial realities of building 100% affordable are extremely difficult, based on the income that you make from a social rent, to be able to make that capital investment to that level. The financial model upon which the housing delivery programme has been based actually uses the developer profit on the private sales to subsidise the social housing, not the other way around. There is no question that the housing delivery programme is subsidising private properties. It is the other way around, of using the healthy housing market values that we have to be able to deliver the social housing. So I just wanted to clarify on that side. In terms of our ability to deliver health provision on the council-owned land, that requires the health service to have the capital injection to be able to do that, and that requires and even if that's about step-down provision, the business models for that need to stack up so that that is financially viable for the long term. On Lowfields, we've not been able to achieve any physical NHS assets on there. There is, according to the NHS planners, sufficient GP capacity within that area in terms of the existing surgeries. I think the problem's not having the room to see your doctor, and it's having the doctor to see your doctor. That's the main issue at the moment, but that's slightly above my pay grade and out of my brief.
Thank you. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. As I've had intimate contacts with the public about issues during the construction phase, these are very relevant to what I'm going to say. I think I would welcome the paper in terms of clarification of some of the sites. I just want to ask two questions to start with before I go into the other aspects, and these come from residents whom I've spoken to recently. Because of the timings, you've now got people in bungalows facing onto the sites that we're talking about, and the Your Space site. So it's understanding in the short term what they will look out onto whilst the impact of this paper is working its way through. And then the question from residents about, well, what happens if, and I know a lot of work has gone into the Your Space project, and they've faced an awful lot of challenges. What happens if that doesn't start? What happens to the land there? And then I'll come back to the comments.
Thank you. So in terms of the care home plot, yeah, so at the moment that has got quite a lot of construction materials on there. We know about that. Waits will be leaving site towards the end of March, April time, and they will clear that site. So that site will be cleared and levelled when they leave site and left in that way until further development comes forward. So sorry, the Your Space site, they are due to start on site in summer 2023, as sort of outlined in the paper. They have 18 months from then to complete their site. There are stepping rights within the contract if they don't meet those timeframes, and it would be a member's decision if we were to use those stepping rights.
Thank you for that, and I'd be grateful for a written summary of that, because people are very interested. In terms of the utilisation of the plot that was going to be originally a police station, I think to clarify that as being used for housing, I think that's a sensible position. This was always going to be a difficult site to construct on because of the points of access. It was a school. It was built as a school site. It wasn't built as the construction access for all of this activity. So I think that would bring clarification, and it will bring much sought after bungalows. And I think the experience that was gained through the construction at Cheltenham Court of accessible bungalows there, the same officer was brought in to examine the bungalows on this site, and I think that's worked very well, because there is a demand locally for bungalows, and I think that fits with the intention to help people stay in their homes longer, and that's something to be celebrated. So the clarification there, and I think that the clarification on what was the care home site, to keep that as over 55 housing, and I'm not sure whether declaration of interest, but you know, I'll be two years off in July. But but I think the principle of recognising it's in the context of the road network to there, and I think that does give surety in the longer term to residents, and I think it does answer a demand in the local community that they want to stay there, but those attractive options liberate family homes in the process, and that helps the wider community. There is a dynamic review on the immediate consequence of impact on road infrastructure, which I appreciate the work that Sophie's been doing. But I think we need to face up to whatever happens with the 3 remaining sites, the access route is through Dijon Avenue, and that was not built wide enough for this level of construction. So what I would ask is that the officers urgently investigate measures to address highway-related concerns from the impact of the construction taking place on the site, with a report to be brought back to an executive member decision session for the executive member for transport to consider how these impacts can be resolved. It's recognising that even if there is just utilisation of the Dijon Avenue from Green Lane to that site, you've got a very constrained road network for that, and that would, I think, answer those issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I go to Tracy and Sophie, just going to bring in to clarify on that recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation, as it's put, is fine. I think we need to be clear that the reason that it's fine is because this is a council-owned site and therefore we control the construction traffic. In planning terms, generally construction traffic is simply accepted as a factor of life which is transient and goes away after a period of time. But because this is our development and therefore our ability to control, then that's why we'll be looking at it.
Thank you. I can assure you that the public very much do see this as a council led construction site, and therefore that has influenced the number of issues being raised with me as a councillor.
Tracy or Sophie, anything to add?
No, just in the context of that discussion, one of the sites will be disposed of. So any additional non-planning enforcement of a construction management plan would need to be done through that sale process, which is going to be a little bit more complicated because it won't that part of the scheme won't be delivered by CYC. I don't know if you've got any comments from a planning perspective now.
Well, just that obviously planning enforcement, it has its limitations, and I think there's also the difficulties, and it's just reflecting accurately to the community the ability to control traffic on the highway. That isn't in our control. That's people have an absolute right to access that, and whilst you do have opportunities through construction asset management plans, we've had issues with subcontractors and individuals, and they are of their own free will able to access the public highway. So there are limitations, but I do think that the proposals does give us extra sort of emphasis on our need to control, but just being very clear as to the limitations of the control measures that are available to us when we're talking about public highway and sale of land out of our control.
So we've got the recommendations in front of us with that additional recommendation, which I know Bryn and Fiona have a copy of. Can I please see if colleagues are happy to accept those? Thank you very much. So clear consensus in favour of accepting that paper and that additional recommendation. Thank you very much. That then brings us straight on to agenda item 5, which is the Finance and Performance Monitor 3. And this starts on page 31, and I'll hand over to Debbie.
Thank you. So this report outlines the finance and performance position at the end of December 22 and highlights a range of budget pressures in both adults and children's social care in particular. Members are, of course, aware that those social care pressures are a national issue and not something that's unique to York. The summary position is outlined in table 1 at paragraph 13 and shows a forecast overspend of 3.7 million. The report also goes on to outline the mitigation and some of the other actions being taken to try and manage that bottom line position. And of course, this work will continue throughout the remainder of the financial year with the aim of managing the overall position through that robust cost control and identification of any further mitigations. Clearly, I also need to point out that potentially these actions will not be able to manage the position to the point the budget will balance overall. And if that was the case, we would need to call on the Council's general reserve to balance the budget at year end. We have, of course, again, faced an incredibly challenging set of circumstances over the last 12 months or so. So again, it wouldn't be unreasonable should we need to call on that general reserve. But clearly that would create a budget pressure in 2023-24 that we would need to consider. So there's detailed analysis of both the finance and the performance in the annexes to the report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I shall endeavour to be brief this evening. I think at the December meeting, I commended Debbie on managing to get such a brief report of only 7 pages into that one. I think we've sort of overdone it this time in terms of going the other way with a full agenda. Just reflecting, I think paragraph 1 states this is the 3rd report of the financial year. I got to thinking this will actually be the 12th one of these that I've brought to the executive since you took the enlightened decision of asking me to take over the finance portfolio my previous time in leisure. And at the same time, it's the 12th one that Debbie will have brought. So it's the last one of this particular council cycle. I just wanted to put my thanks to officers, Debbie and her team, for all the hard work they've put in. As you mentioned, it's not been a particularly easy time, the backdrop of pressures that we've all faced. On top of that, we had COVID. We've had economic chaos. We've had 4 chancellors in 4 years. multiple different prime ministers. It certainly has been an eventful period of time to be in the finance portfolio, but my thanks go to officers in terms of doing that. Think of what's happening nationally, as Debbie alluded to, that this is not situations that is unique to York as a council. We're looking at announcements, I think it was on Monday, that 3 particular councils have been asking next year for double-digit council tax increases due to multiple bankruptcies, and actually the Secretary of State having to step in to allow them to avoid referendums, to allow them to go ahead with those double-digit rises in council tax. Just shows the immense pressure that local government nationally is being placed under. I think paragraph 12 then, in terms of this one, is probably one of the most prudent in here, that we see that we have had through this period 4 years of, quote, sound financial management and delivering priority services to high standards. And I think we have to step back and remember that sometimes it's not always just about talking about the numbers and the pressures we face. Behind that is a significant amount of hard work and significant amount of very high standard services that this council and council officers are delivering. Paragraph 2, and I think Debbie may have said it again tonight, known pressures. I think if I was going to write a theme to this particular period of time, I think known pressures is definitely, that's probably the first 2 words that start on the report when she starts writing it every particular time we come around. We've always had those issues around adults and children. Those are ongoing. As mentioned earlier by one of the mentions, is the significant pressures this places on the NHS. We're still seeing issues around delayed discharges of care, despite the fact significant amount of investment is going in locally to adult social care. Numbers are rising and that capacity is increasing, but demand is increasing far higher. So we will continue to look in around that, and that is something that we have to deal with. And then on top of that, we've been given the double whammy of new inflationary pressures and pay pressures, another issue that's becoming quite live nationally that we continue to have to deal with. I welcome this report in terms of seeing some improvements in the financial position in terms of the children's department and police department. I think it's good to see that those particular areas have been able to improve those positions. Not putting Jamila on the spot, obviously, that is the one that's going in the opposite direction. I think just looking at paragraphs 30 to 44, that gives you a clear indication of the significant rise in cost of care. I think one of those conversations I used to have with residents a long time ago, which we don't have to have now, is why is council tax rising above inflation? And explaining to people, well, adult social care has no interest in what inflation is as a wider RPI or CPI. Adult social care increases are entirely as they are. Now we're actually rising less than inflation, but adult social care is probably still an outlier in those costs of care do continue to increase, as well as the demand itself increasing. And then I think finally, on top of that, I just wanted to reflect on some of those performance statistics and evidence that's in there. So page 77, a big thank you to staff in customer services. We know about the cost of living crisis, significant amount of money, both from the government and from this local authority, being pushed out to people to make sure they have as much support as they have as quickly as possible. Those are staff that's new roles that have been added to the work that they were on doing. So I think really a reflection of that one. Page 37, education. It's not something we've had. So a lot of those issues were put to one side during COVID. So it's the first time we've had some of those education statistics back in there. And I think reflecting, as it says on page 37, our Progress 8 scores improved against a backdrop of national decreases in terms of average. So I think I really reflect on some of that work. Page 36, antisocial behaviour in the city centre. Despite some of the picture that's being portrayed nationally negatively around our city centre continues to be a safe and inclusive place to be. And we see again, city centre ASB is falling for the 3rd year in a row. So I think that's really particularly welcome. Our city centre footfall, while not quite back to pre-COVID levels, continues to be particularly strong. And despite people constantly raising it with me about empty shops in the city centre, we still continue to have one of the lowest shop vacancies nationally, and way, I think about half the level of vacancies that would be seeing most national averages. This administration has always put particular focus on mental health. We've always made sure mental health receives additional investment in each of our budgets. So page 37, as I always welcome that we have double the national rate of people with mental health condition actually in employment, which is one of the most significant factors and significant barriers. I think with that, Chair, I'm probably happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's continues to be a challenge looking at our financial position, doesn't it? And gauging quite where we are going with this and what the future will bring to us. But I think we should feel fortunate that our reserves remain at the point that they are at this point in time. And it will be interesting to see what happens when we close out this financial year with the next report for Q4. But I think what I would like to say is that it's going to be ever more important that our financial prudence and competency is shown at every stage. And I do feel that there's still further work to be done within the council at looking at every aspect of what we do and how we do it to make sure that we are driving out the best value for our council taxpayers around that. So, for example, external contracts and value for money, the potential for looking at, is it more cost effective and better for our services to bring some things back in-house and develop our own skills base in certain areas. I foresee this being an ongoing process over the coming years, likely never to end. And I think we should always be looking at this. I would like to thank the Chief Financial Officer and her team for all of the work that has been carried out. But I do think that we will be working together on this, I assume, over many years to make sure that we do maintain our reserves and not end up in the financial situation that unfortunately many other local authorities find themselves in. So thank you for that.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to briefly highlight some of the performance data in the report, particularly things in my portfolio. It's good to see that despite the many challenges that the organisation and the city has faced over the last 2 years, performance across the wider organisation, not just the council plan indicators, has continued to remain high and continues to compare favourably when benchmarked against other areas with similar characteristics to York. We know just how difficult the current economic circumstances are for employers and for workers across the city, but it's good to see the increase in median earning. Let's start again. Good to see the increase in median earnings, increase in footfall, and a further fall in the number of vacant shops as set out in the report. A similar positive economic picture of the city was presented in the recent City Outlook 2023, the Centre for Cities annual health check of the UK cities and large towns in their study. York was ranked having the 8th highest employment rate in the country and the highest in the north of England. York was also placed 4th highest in the country in regard to the percentage of people with higher level qualifications. The city also continues to have the lowest unemployment benefit claimant count in the country. The new figures and the performance report present a strong and positive indication that York continues having a healthy recovery despite the ongoing inflation and cost of living pressures. Despite this, we can't afford to be complacent, and there's more challenges yet ahead of our local economy and businesses. It's clear that in a region, there is need for the government to deliver on their levelling up promises. This is why we'll continue to make the case for long-term support and investment in the north. Locally, we'll continue to all we can, all that's possible, to support our businesses and ensure the city continues a strong and sustainable recovery for the benefit of our communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we've got the recommendations in front of us as proposed earlier by Councillor Eyre. So can I please see those that are happy to accept those recommendations? That's clear consensus. Thank you very much. That then moves us on to agenda item 6, the capital programme monitor, and that starts on page 79. And back to Debbie.
Thank you. This report sets out progress in delivering the capital programme for the current financial year. There are no major issues actually to draw to your attention other than to say that there continues to be a significant level of investment in a wide range of schemes. The report does outline where there is some slippage with expenditure and associated funding being moved to future years of the programme, and the report outlines some further detail on those schemes.
Thank you very much. Happy to open this paper, Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, welcome this report and the investment that goes into the capital programme. I think it has been disregarded in some quarters as sort of an unnecessary vanity spend, but I think capital investment is absolutely vital in our ability to grow our economy, have a strong economy, support our vulnerable residents and maintain our frontline services. It's not just revenue. Revenue and capital go hand in hand. I think for what's a relatively moderate revenue investment each year, we will be delivering £127 million of capital works by the end of this financial year. Of those areas, looking at how that split goes across, that's around £50 million into transport and highways, and £50 million into housing, and £50 million into our work with vulnerable children. Just digging into some of the schemes that have been delivered, as Debbie alluded to, so £17 million in delivering new homes. At that level, we're now at of up to 60% affordable across the sites that we're currently operating. There are 109 completed, I believe, in Lowfield, heading towards 120 by the end of the year. Work has started on site at Burnholme and Duncan, which is over another 112 homes, I think, across that one. Again, that investment in transport, so £9 million spent on highways, plus the mention of almost £2 million of ward funding capital that's gone into those areas. The £11 million investment this year in highways and highway improvements, 1.3 million investment in EV charging, as that's going forward. More to do, but again, big step forwards. I won't steal that. Paul Sunday wants to mention it, but we're looking at the delivery of the community woodland, which he tells me about endlessly, and endlessly tells me that we continue to get a significant amount of external funding. So I believe his report says almost entirely capital funded through DEFRA this time, not requiring any council borrowing. And then finally, wanted to just have a quick mention of the libraries programme. So Hackney and Wigginton opens during this period. I haven't had a chance to visit yet. I did visit a long time ago, and it was my portfolio when we were first looking at particular sites, but unfortunately I haven't had a chance as yet to go. I did go to take my son football at the back and realised I couldn't park there, so but not had a chance to go since it's actually been completed. And obviously we've got now planning approval for the Clifton Library being delivered by this administration and the portfolio holder rather than actual Labour activists in Clifton, I do believe, in terms of that one. So happy to move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Douglas, and then I'll go to Councillor Duggan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not really sure what you're referring to about Labour activists in Clifton delivering the Rawcliffe Library, Councillor Eyre. It's a bit of a misnomer, I think. So if you let me continue, you've had your time to speak. Thank you. So what I suppose I would say is from the capital project, capital programme, is that as far as investment in roads and road infrastructure goes, I think if you ask local residents around the city what their experience of using the roads is, that they are in a dreadful state at the moment. And the area that, interestingly, I think you were referring to, Councillor Eyre, is Rawcliffe and Clifton Without, which seems to have some of the worst roads in the whole city. They've had close to zero investment in their roads out there, but it's interesting how you've managed to find the money for the deeply unpopular as well, barriers in the city centre that continue to keep the blue badge holders out in that area. Residents tell me they find this deeply concerning, and I think we can't disagree with them on that. Thank you.
Councillor Duggan.
Thank you. And just on that last particular point, slightly confused since I understood that the Labour leader was in favour or in support of protecting our citizens through hostile vehicle mitigation measures, which, as we've already been made clear, is a priority for this administration. In fact, it was a previous administration that approved the initial concept for this. So we are progressing that very important measure to protect people within the city centre. The comments I did want to make was also welcoming the work on progressing Haxby Station. There's a number of projects in here which may have had to be reprofiled in terms of timescales to reflect where we're at with them, but Haxby Station is clearly a priority for a sustainable transport infrastructure project, which we're hoping to secure government funding to progress. We've also got reference to the bus service improvement plan allocation of 3-year programme to address the importance of bus services in this city and tackle the financial challenge that public transport faces at this time, as well as making the changes to make the infrastructure more attractive and encourage more people to make use of public transport rather than adding to the congestion within our city. And then finally, just to note, there's also reference in paragraph 30, again, from one extreme to the other, a relatively small project, but very important for sustainable transport, maintaining flood proof access to and from the Millennium Bridge once that work is able to be carried out after the sort of flood season, as it were. So that's why that's reprofiled, to be able to undertake that work following on the flood defence works that the Environment Agency has now concluded along the Clementhorpe and South Bank area of the city to protect properties in that area.
Thank you very much. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor de Gorn, I am in favour of barriers that keep the city centre safe, absolutely. But what I am not in favour of, and nor any of my group, barriers that keep blue badge holders out. And that's what we've got at the moment.
Thank you very much. I imagine the point Councillor de Gorn was making is that the cost for the barriers can't be removed to spend elsewhere, I imagine was the query being made. So we have the recommendation in front of us between pages 79 and 92. If I could please see from colleagues if they're happy to accept that recommendation. Thank you very much. There's clear consensus in favour of accepting that. That then moves us on to agenda item 7, the financial strategy 23-24 to 27-28, which starts for us on page 93, and over to Debbie to introduce this.
Thank you. So this report sets out the revenue budget proposals for the next financial year, and subject to your agreement tonight will of course be referred on to full council in 2 weeks' time. The key issues are the proposed council tax increase, including full use of the adult social care precept, so that's 4.99 in total, and that is the maximum increase allowed. I do understand the majority of other councils are also going for that maximum increase. Proposed savings of 5.5 million are outlined in Annex 2 and include a range of proposals across all areas of the council. Savings are proposed in adult and children's social care, but again, there is additional growth included in the budget for those services, and the proposals do again fully protect the public health budget. I think, as outlined in all the finance reports on the agenda tonight, we are clearly facing some serious financial challenges and some significant underlying financial pressures as well, and the future does remain challenging. So the crucial element of this budget remains that we do have that amount for contingency, and that the general reserve remains at or above that recommended minimum level. So the report also outlines some consultation. The outcome of the consultation with the residents and businesses is included at Annex 4 to the report. In terms of the medium-term financial picture, the local government settlement did include some indicative information for 2024-25, but it also made clear that there'll be no significant reform of local government funding within this comprehensive spending review. So that means 2025-26 at the earliest before we can even hope for any funding reform. And so that uncertainty that I think we've discussed at previous meetings remains, that uncertainty about the level of future funding that we can get remains an issue. And that uncertainty then again adds to some of the financial challenges ahead. And so the report includes a high-level summary of the medium-term sort of financial forecast at paragraph 154 in the table there. The report then goes on to outline the position in the housing revenue account, including the proposed growth, savings and increases to rents and other fees and charges. As outlined in paragraph 177, table 14, the level of budgeted surplus is significantly lower than before. And again, this reduces the flexibility of the housing revenue account to deal with ongoing pressures. And again, as I've included in the report, it's my view that this budgeted surplus certainly shouldn't reduce any further below this level. And again, the 30-year business plan is included as an annex to this report. The dedicated schools grant, the DSG, is also included. It sets out the ring-fence funding for the provision of education and childcare, covers funding to the council as well as maintain schools and academies, funding for special educational needs. The report sets out the various funding blocks and recommends a change in the early years funding formula. This was discussed at the schools forum meeting yesterday, and there was unanimous agreement to the officer recommended option 1, which is outlined in paragraph 206. There is an outline, equalities impact assessment attached to Annex 5 and a specific budget risk assessment at Annex 9 to the report that outlines some of the key issues and risks to be considered. I would also just take this opportunity to remind members of your responsibility to consider the public sector equality duty that's set out in paragraph 222 to 228 of the report, and the supporting equalities impact assessment to take that into account as part of your decision making and your considerations. And finally, the report includes a statement from me as Section 151 officer on the robustness of the budget proposals and my review of the minimum level of reserves. My view of the budget is that it's challenging. I think I say this every year, that it's challenging, it's not without risk, and it will require that careful monitoring throughout the year. But overall, my assessment is that it is prudent and it does include provision for all those known pressures. And so the recommendations begin at paragraph 14. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Debbie. And before I open this to others, just a few comments from me. I think everybody knows, and Councillor Eyre has already commented, that over the past 12 months, we've witnessed a particularly turbulent time for the economy, and once again, local councils coming under considerable strain. Since the last council budget was set back in February 2022, we've seen inflation soar beyond 10%, energy prices have surged, and in 4 months of 2022, we saw 4 different chancellors. And as a result, that economic turmoil has created a really challenging time for many residents, for many businesses, and of course, that is no different for the council. With the cost of living crisis continuing to persist, demand for services equally has continued to increase. And as you can see from paragraph 5 of the report, that financial context has generated an in-year financial pressure of 8.5 million for the council, mitigated down, as we heard earlier, to 3.7 million. With all of this in mind, the importance of stabilising the council's finances has never been more important, and therefore difficult decisions must be taken. And that's why 5.5 million of savings have been identified for this financial year, so that we can continue to protect those services that local communities rely on. As colleagues will see from this report, a total of 19 million in additional revenue funding will be added to the budget to protect and support services, continuing the important progress we've made on the many objectives outlined in the council plan, but also responding to those new challenges that we face. The funding will be invested across a range of council services, helping residents to remain in their homes for longer, supporting the critical work of our social workers, and continuing progress on key regeneration projects such as York Central. We're also going one step further and utilising budgets to create new measures, including additional support for the financially vulnerable during the cost of living crisis, funding to tackle antisocial behaviour, funding for a new specialist youth support worker, funding to promote better mental health and to support those residents with autism, and further funding to incentivise the use of local public transport. The ambitious capital programme will also maintain momentum on many key projects, as I've just mentioned, York Central, dualling the Outer Ring Road, and to deliver the station frontage scheme. Beyond those incredibly important projects, the capital programme will also see £100 million of investment to deliver new housing in the city, including low carbon and affordable homes. 45 million will also be spent on the city's existing infrastructure, including roads and flood defences. The capital programme represents a significant level of investment in our city, and something I know residents and businesses will welcome. Looking at paragraphs 68 to 80 of the report, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everyone that engaged in the consultation process that helped inform the budget. We've had more people respond to our budget consultation, with over 550 responses received. So thank you to everybody who took the time to share their thoughts and views, ensuring that the budget proposals reflected residents' priorities. Equally echo Councillor Eyre's thanks to officers for all of their work over a long period of time to get us to this point. I will just finish by noting the points made in paragraphs 26 and 27. Here in York, financially, we are starting behind many other local authorities due to years of central government underinvestment in our city. We remain one of the 20 lowest funded authorities in the country, and the Fair Funding Review, first promised in 2016, is delayed once again. I'm really pleased and proud of the work that has been undertaken to create these budget proposals, but with the ever-growing financial instability of the public sector and local government generally, we really need the government to address this issue and provide the funding and long-term solutions that local government so desperately need. We will continue to make the case for York And on that note, I will finish there. Happy to support the recommendations outlined in paragraphs 14 to 18. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. This is, I believe, the 16th budget I worked out that I've been involved with. It's probably one of the most difficult. None of them have been particularly easy across that period. I think I've done 4 in opposition, 2 on the backbenches, and 10 as an exec member. I think perhaps Councillor Waller and Carroll might be the only ones who've done more than 10 as an exec member in terms of budget. Margin, that's been about 6 years, I think you might have been on me. I'll have to have a check on that one. I think, yeah, the backdrop, as Councillor Ashton alluded to, is the ongoing failure to address the funding of local government. So I just wanted to put a bit of context in terms of the comments that the leader made of that difference between different areas of the country. So I've mentioned many times before, Kensington has a spending power of £1,300 per person, compared to York's 706, nearly half the spending power of one of the wealthiest boroughs. So the figure that we look at is if that was at the average, not even at Kensington levels, if it was at the average, that would be an extra £16.5 million on top of this budget, which would allow us to address some of those long-standing issues in adult social care. As I continue to say, council tax is a regressive taxation. It's not based on people's ability to pay. We're continually asking those most vulnerable and those least able to pay to fund the cost of social care, to fund the cost of children's social care. It needs fundamental reform. Some of those examples. So, for example, it was in London, £1,377 per head received from the government, compared to the lowest 20 receiving 919. And the flip around of this is the varying difference in council tax. So in those inner London boroughs, on average, council tax are around about £1,400, compared to the lowest 20 local authorities, on average, around about £2,000 a year council tax. So it really goes to show how some of those people are putting into context, as the F20 have done. Somebody in a £1 million house in Westminster will pay half the council tax of someone living in a £375,000 house in Leicester. It's absolutely staggering when you start to look at those levels of inequalities and the pressure that puts on places like York as we come to try and set our budgets. And that is putting aside the issues that I've mentioned already, the previous thing around issues in the NHS and the adult social care crisis really is a crisis, and it's been going on for decades. And while the Fair Funding Review keeps getting kicked down the long grass, the adult social care funding review gets kicked even further. I think we must be on to about 50 different green and white papers now, none of which has actually made it onto the statute books. And as I alluded to earlier, the pressure that is placing on local authorities is immense. We had multiple bankruptcies, as I mentioned previous times, and to put some, again, figures to those comments I made earlier, Thurrock and Croydon Council, 10% council tax increases. Slough is going as far as 15% council tax increases, just to allow them to be able to balance their books. Despite that, we are looking, as the leader alluded to invest £19 million this year. That's an extra £3 million in adults to go to the 1.6 million we put into this year's budget, an extra £2 million into children's to go with the 2.7 we put in this year. And when I did the figures, that's around about £22.1 million of growth that's got into our People's Directorates across the period since we were elected in a 4-year cycle. We have to do with those issues of inflation, £6 million cost alone. And as I say, those issues around making sure our staff are well paid and well remunerated will be £5 million this year. And I think looking going forward, that's going to become an even bigger issue as we look to next year's pay award. So we're proposing to put that council tax at 2.99% and the social care precept at 2%. That doesn't come anywhere near to addressing the needs that we had in this budget. So we will be delivering around about £5.5 million of savings and £8.2 million over the 2 years. It hasn't been easy. It's not something I think anybody around here ever really wants to do in terms of making those savings. There is no low-hanging fruit left, as I keep alluding to. We've been doing efficiency drives every year since I was elected. We really are squeezing the back office to the bone, and we're seeing that having an impact across council services. Again, as the leader alluded to, we do recognise the unique situation we're in at this particular moment, the pressure that places onto individuals. So we are doing as much as possible through one-off funding to be able to support some of those issues, as we always have. So £250,000 going in to help address the cost of living crisis. Again, £100,000 on mental health on top of the £250,000 we've already put in. £150,000 to tackle some of the ASB outside of the city centre in many ways, looking at some of the ward issues. Sustainable transport, £100,000 in terms of that one, £100,000 on substance abuse, and then devolving more funding down, as we always have tried to do, to local communities, empowering them to be able to drive the change that they need. And the last thing I had on here was consultation. You've mentioned most of it, Councillor Ashton, but the one thing you did mention was that we continue to do our focus groups. I think, as I mentioned at my decision session, that has been really enlightening, and I do recommend everybody goes and finds that particular annex and reads through that information. It was a really worthwhile process. We always have that difficulty in terms of a questionnaire about how you get across the sheer complexities of what council budget is, what council is responsible for, and what those pressures are. And I think you see an evolution through those focus group discussions from people who think it's very straightforward, think it's the bins, and get into conversations. And I think the one I mentioned at my decision session that really did stick home with me was the children's services. And a lot of the questions that came from the public were around, well, you don't run schools anymore, so why are you spending so much on children's area? And it's that lack of awareness across many people about the sheer importance of children's social care and what an effort that goes into that one that people don't see. And by the end of those focus groups, I think people were probably towards pushing for higher council tax increases and getting more investment into services. So it really was a worthwhile exercise, both in terms of working with the public, understanding the public, and getting that feedback to go in, along with a lot of the quantitative stuff that we get from the survey. So with that, Chair, happy to approve recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I couldn't agree with the leader and Councillor Eyre more about the absolute dearth of investment from central government into local authorities and the impacts that this has. And we see that every day, don't we, out in our communities. And we absolutely want to be able to solve that problem, but we absolutely need the government to face up to its responsibilities as well. And I have said this to you previously, I think, in another forum, but the idea to me that the most vulnerable in our society, adults and children, vulnerable adults and children, are not supported by central government taxation and only by council tax is just unthinkable. So government funding of local authorities, and particularly in York, it has reduced by 40% over the period from 2010, which is huge when you think about inflationary pressures. Fair funding review not done. Backtracking on funding of adult social care. I mean, it just goes on, doesn't it? And until we get this sorted out, the outlook for us and our ability to do the things that we want to do in our communities looks very challenging indeed. And the government needs to push it, pull its finger out on this and get moving, because we can't wait for much longer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Craghill, did you want to say anything, or would you rather on the capital item?
Maybe very briefly. I shall try not to repeat what's been said, apart from obviously to agree with the points about the lack of government funding and how challenging all of this this budget is this year. I am glad that Councillor Eyre has appreciated the contributions of the focus groups. I'm really pleased about that, because I did push quite hard for those to happen. I think it's a really good, helpful contribution in a very difficult situation, of course. I think it's really important that we have managed to protect social care services as much as we have in this budget, and that we do have, despite the difficulties, those additional pieces of investment, those one-off investments in some really key areas such as antisocial behaviour, the specialist youth workers proposal, substance misuse services, mental health services, etc. And I'm also pleased that we're able to combine that with funding under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund for things like climate change, which of course is so crucial, and supporting businesses, green skills, business decarbonisation, and extending advice services for residents on energy saving, which is something I think is really crucial to delivering on retrofit, and something I've also been pushing for. I'm really pleased to see that we are able to progress that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've got the recommendations in front of us on agenda item 7. Can I please see those in favour of accepting those? That's clear consensus. Thank you very much. That then takes us through to agenda item 8. The capital budget starts on page 221. Debbie.
So this report outlines the capital programme for the next 5 years with a particular focus on the next financial year. As capital investment funded by borrowing has a revenue impact, I'm mindful of the council's financial position. There has been a review of the level of capital investment needed, and it's considered that a number of project lines could be reduced or removed without impacting on the delivery of the key objectives, and the details of those proposed reductions are set out in paragraphs 3 through to paragraph 8. And the report also outlines that over 51 million of new capital funding will be added to the 5-year programme. And again, the report outlines the various schemes. So that's probably I'll being asked to recommend proposals to full council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to move the recommendation on this one. I think we have a current capital programme, as we mentioned earlier, of around about £560 million. This continues to maintain our ambition with a proposed £480 million in this new capital budget. Again, those areas of focus, so housing, one of the biggest areas with £172 million proposals, and transport and highways with around 205 million, the third highest area there being children's with 28 million. I always want to reflect on the fact that a large chunk of this is external. So from the existing capital programme, it's about 216 million, which is about 40%. So maintaining that investment is really crucial, not just in terms of delivering the schemes, but making sure we're able to continue to bring external funding into the city. In terms of the proposals, it's much smaller probably than many of the capital programmes that we've brought forward in terms of changes. So we are looking to reduce pressure on borrowing to enable us to protect some of those frontline services and adult social care revenue issues. And so we have looked at scheme reviews, we have looked at asset reviews in terms of making sure that we can get some of that borrowing reduced. That does still, however, allow for further investment of over £51 million being added into the capital programme. So there's a £22 million extension on the rolling programme, which will see an extra £6.8 million of highways. That's on top of the £50 million in terms of highways repairs and maintenance that we've put in since the administration was formed. Again, £9 million of external rolling funding. So another £5.4 million goes into highways through that one. And the very important £2 million added on to the final year of the disabled facilities grant. There is a large chunk, around £80 million about housing, but I'm sure Councillor Craghill will want to reflect on that herself. So happy to approve the recommendations. Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Craghill.
Thank you, Chair. We have mentioned the housing delivery quite a bit already this evening. So I think I'd just like to really try not to repeat what's already been said. I think the approach in this capital budget is a prudent one in the context of the wider budget challenges. It's the right way to go. And as we've already said, we are still delivering significant progress on delivering new homes through the housing delivery programme, and exceeding that, on track to exceed that target, that 600 home target. And it is really welcome. We can do that with high levels of affordability and high levels of sustainability and energy saving and social value. Beyond that, it's also encouraging that we have 17.8 million of growth in the modernisation of existing council homes, as this will go a long way to improve the energy efficiency of those existing homes, upgrade older UPVC windows, prevent damp and control moisture, and install new composite doors to council homes. All that work is incredibly important for our tenants, and I'm pleased that this increase in funding has been included in the capital programme. It will include the quality of life for our tenants living in those homes, and the specific investment we're making in energy efficiency measures will also help residents with those surging energy costs, and contribute to our overall efforts to tackle the climate emergency. So I do welcome that part of the programme.
Thank you very much. Can't see any further hands, so we've got the recommendations in front of us on agenda item 8. Can I please see those in favour of accepting that? So thank you to everybody. We can accept agenda item 8 and now move on to agenda item 9, capital financing and investment strategy, which starts on page 249. And back to Debbie.
Thank you. This is just a regular standard report that's a requirement of the Prudential Code. There have been no significant changes from the previous year. It just sets out the approach and risk appetite to funding of capital investment, and you're being asked to recommend this to full council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eyre.
I can't improve on Debbie's summary, so I think I'm happy to just to move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much. And having given a couple of seconds, we've got the recommendation there. Can I please see all of those in favour of accepting that recommendation? Thank you very much. That's very clear. Now we'll move to agenda item 10, Treasury Management Strategy Statement, starts on page 259. Back to Debbie.
Thank you. Another statutory report required by the Prudential Code. Again, no significant changes to the strategy to bring to your attention. The report has been considered already by Audit and Governance Committee in their scrutiny role at their January meeting, and there were no concerns that were raised by that committee to feed back to you. And again, you're being asked to recommend this to full council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, a reflection on paragraph 39 on page 268. I think to paraphrase the old snooker commentary, for the benefit of those in black and white, the red line is the dotted line on that particular graph. Maybe just say the dotted line in future, but happy to move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much. Debbie, don't know whether you want to comment.
Councillor Fisher did raise the same point at me in Audit and Governance Committee, but then also told me he was colourblind anyway. So we are going to look at this. It's a new Prudential indicator, and to be honest, it's been very challenging for us as well. So we are going to look at a better way to present that in future.
Clearly, those 4 years that Councillor Fisher taught me physics somehow led to some mining.
Thank you very much. Again, can't see any further hands. So we've got the recommendation in front of us. Can I please see all those in favour of accepting that? So it's clear consensus in favour of accepting agenda item 10. Agenda item 11 is urgent business. I will double check, but I've not been told that we have any today, which brings the executive meeting today to a close. So thank you everybody for attending and participating. Of course, we do have another executive meeting on Tuesday. So we are back again then. Thank you.